I've had a secret crush on that guy from the next class for a while now. We never really crossed paths. I don't know if it's the think of someone during the day, and you'll dream of them at night thing, but I started seeing him in my dreams. Ren Li, Lin Jingjing, good night. I still remember it was mid-July. The acceptance letter from Wutong City No. 1 High School seemed to drift all the way to me on the fragrance of lotus flowers, blooming near the city center. Wutong City No. 1 High is the key high school in our city. A few years back, there were reforms. The leaders went to Hengxi for an inspection, thought it was excellent, and boldly pushed forward with restructuring the school. Before we knew it, a plaque reading, Hengxi Middle School Experience Exchange Partner, had been hung at the entrance. The new school had regulations: compulsory boarding, no cell phones allowed, uniforms. Everything else was manageable. But that compulsory boarding, for someone like me who had never boarded at school before, I couldn't help but feel a bit intimidated. I looked at the acceptance letter on the table and pushed open my bedroom window. The July cicadas chirping stretched on and on, the leaves were emerald green, nameless birds flitted by, and a faint breeze slipped through the window. I sighed, fantasizing about my soon-to-begin high school life. My fingers traced the letter over and over. I wonder what kind of people I'll meet, I murmured softly. 2 months slipped away in the blink of an eye. It was time for school to start. My dad carried my bedding, my mom carried a basin, and I carried my backpack. Our family piled into our old beat-up Jetta, worth maybe 80 or 90,000, and drove all the way through the gates of Wutong City No. 1 High. Apart from picking up the sheets and quilt cover, which Mom and Dad could help with, registration had to be done in person. Summer's heat felt like being roasted on an oven rack, skin and all. The clouds in the north were obedient, drifting slowly in big chunks, seemingly unwilling to block the sun's rays. It was still the height of summer, and the light was blindingly harsh. We new students, clutching our high school entrance exam acceptance letters, ID cards, and a pile of other documents, queued up outside the archives room. Our uniforms hadn't been distributed yet. We wore our own clothes, different styles and colors, forming a long line. In such sweltering heat, only the occasional wispy breeze blew, barely perceptible. If you looked closely, you could see tiny beads of sweat on people's necks. Sunlight filtered through the branches and fell upon the long line, each person's shadow like a thick ink blot quietly tucked into the gaps. Some people were bathed in golden light. Lucky for me, I wasn't getting sunburned. The guy in front of me was really tall. He blocked the sun completely. His height carved out a little patch of cool, shaded sanctuary for me at the back of the line, giving me a chance to breathe. I quietly scrunched myself into a ball, hiding under his shadow, occasionally glancing with dismay at the slow-moving queue ahead. Perhaps out of sheer boredom, I started staring at the back of his head. The curve of it was perfectly shaped. I don't know if it was because he was thin, but his occipital bone was clearly visible. The skin on the back of his neck was a little red from the sun. He was looking down slightly. I had no idea what he was looking at. His hair was cut quite short, giving him a clean and neat look. Maybe because we were standing close in line, I could even catch a whiff of laundry detergent from his clothes. It smelled nice. I wondered what brand it was. It gave off a very comforting feeling. A wave of restlessness rippled through the crowd. I snapped out of it, slowly poking my head out from the shadowy patch to glance at the long line. They were all boys and girls on the cusp of a new stage, inevitably sizing each other up in this new environment. Many were scanning the long line for familiar faces. The weather was just too hot and oppressive. I felt too lazy to move and just wanted to stay in that cool shaded spot. I hugged my belongings tightly, sticking close under the shadow of the person in front. I stared at the shadows on the ground and suddenly noticed the shadow move. It seemed like someone had called out to the guy in front. His foot shifted slightly. Perplexed, I looked up. The sunlight happened to fall perfectly on him. The tips of his hair seemed to shimmer. Half of his profile was visible, revealing handsome brows and eyes. I lifted my gaze and only saw him, edged with a gilt light. As luck would have it, at that very moment, Reborn Tulip's First Love started playing in my earphones. Beautiful impression like first love, silently gazing. That looked like lightning. It's hard to describe the feeling at that moment. For an instant, it felt like my blood had stopped flowing, and the second hand on my watch had ceased its ticking. The wind seemed to freeze the frame, me with my head raised, and him with half his profile showing. Soon after registration, it was time to head to our assigned classes. Clutching my registration slip, I searched for my name on the bulletin board. The school had posted the class assignments for our grade there. It was crowded, everyone jostling forward to see which class they'd been placed in. I was squeezed so tight I could barely breathe, dizzy from the heat and the throng, struggling to find my name. Watong City No. 1 high-class assignments. Li K. Class 1. Jiang San. Class 1. Ren Li. Class 5 Lin Jingjing. Class 6 line by line. I searched diligently for my name. Muttering under my breath, my eyes scanned downwards. My eyes lit up. Found it. I'm in Class 6. Struggling out of the crowded mass, I felt like I could breathe again. I took a deep breath, inexplicably nervous. Nervous about what? I couldn't really say. Nervous about the new environment. Nervous about what the new teachers would be like. Nervous if my classmates would be friendly. Nervous if I'd make new friends at the new school. Nervous ... A new life was about to begin. After taking a deep breath, I jogged over to the school's signboard, trying to figure out the route to my new classroom. The sun was still glaring. I shaded my eyes with one hand and used the other to trace the map. Probably go this way first ... then. Like that ... and then how do I go from there? I mumbled softly. I'd never been able to tell my east from west, north from south since I was little. The tricky part was that many road signs in the north only indicate the cardinal directions. So, every time I look at a map like this, I get stumped. I hunched my back, feeling a bit dejected. If only my dad were here. Just as I was staring at the ground, face scrunched up in despair, ready to squat down and give up, suddenly I felt a shadow fall over my head, bringing an instant wave of coolness. I turned my head to look. It was that guy from registration. The shadow classmate who'd stood in front of me. He was also standing in front of the signboard, just a few steps away. From this angle I could see his profile. A high nose bridge, a defined jawline, his lips slightly pressed together. I felt like I was going crazy, staring straight at him for a good while. Standing tall there, he seemed to block out all the oppressive heat. This classmate was really handsome, I thought to myself. I snuck another glance. For some reason, seeing him always made my heart flutter. I pretended to study the signboard nonchalantly, though I wasn't actually taking anything in. After a moment, the figure beside me vanished from my peripheral vision. Possessed by some impulse, only one thought remained in my head. Follow him. Just like the tall back in the queue, I watched him stride forward step by step. Hesitating no longer, I set off. It felt like I hadn't followed for long before the distant figure disappeared. I walked on a bit and stopped where he'd vanished. I turned my head to look. Grade 10. Class 5. Instinctively, I turned towards the window of Class 5. The classroom was sparsely filled, almost empty, except for him, conspicuously seated in the last row. He was just sitting there, again only showing half his profile. He was drinking water from a bottle. It seemed like there was sweat on his forehead. It felt like a feather was tickling my heart. So he's from Class 5. I made a mental note and continued walking. Class 5 and Class 6 shouldn't be far apart. Sure enough, I spotted my classroom after just a few steps. I didn't hesitate any longer, turned, and entered the room, picking a seat by the window. After sitting down, I turned to survey my surroundings. The classroom was brand new but felt a bit empty. Probably because not many students had arrived yet. The bookcases were still empty, and a thin layer of dust covered the desks. I looked towards the blackboard. Someone had written something on it. Probably some seniors from the previous year. They thought they were leaving hell, but they were actually leaving heaven. Han Han. I couldn't help but read it aloud. This place? Heaven? Hell? No way of knowing. That evening during self-study we hadn't received our textbooks yet. We'd had military training during the day, but evening self-study was still on. Some were reading supplementary books they prepared. Some were reading novels. Some were whispering. Everyone was still unfamiliar, maintaining a polite distance. Most students were focused on their own things. I hesitated for a moment, then took out my notebook from my bag. I don't keep a diary, but I like to note down significant events from the day in small date grids. September 2nd, 2018. Sunny. Sunday class 5. Shadow. After scribbling that down, I quickly shut the notebook, afraid someone might see. The week-long military training was coming to an end. Our school organized us into battalions by class. For instance, I was in the 6th Battalion. On the evening before the last day, our instructor organized a singing contest. The 5th Battalion and the 6th Battalion happened to be together. The 5th Battalion? That meant ... I felt inexplicably excited. Our two classes were quite quiet. No one stepped up to perform for a long time, while the neighboring battalion seemed very lively. A really cute girl sang a short love letter a long time. Wave after wave of cheers and shouts came from over there, and students from both our class and Class 5 kept turning their heads to look. Maybe the atmosphere was just too dull. Our instructor couldn't stand it anymore and started dragging people out for some public punishment. I sat on the lawn, knees hugged to my chest, trying hard to keep my head down, terrified he might call me out to perform. Perhaps reluctant to embarrass the shy girls, the instructor ended up pulling out a boy instead. So handsome. Shouldn't such a handsome guy perform a little something? I quietly raised my head and peeked at the boy who'd been called out. His familiar face was a bit blurry under the dim lights of the sports field. I slowly lifted my lowered head, and taking advantage of the moonlight in the dark night, began to openly study him. Just like everyone else around me, he was watching him. Surrounded by a circle of people, he was silent for a moment. He looked down, seemingly lost in thought. After a long pause, he seemed a little embarrassed, lifted his head slightly, and smiled at the instructor. He declined no further. A low, masculine hum started to form a melody. As he sang, he still kept his eyes slightly lowered. A profound silence fell around us, everyone savoring the brief, moving tune. Someone whispered quietly nearby, "What song is that? It's so beautiful." I said nothing, just kept my gaze fixed on him, fully immersed in his singing. It was Flush Straight. I recognized it. If they say iron can be ground into a needle, as long as one is willing to wait, as long as one loves deeply enough, is it then possible to move this heart of stone? He sang with downcast eyes, yet amidst the thick darkness of the night, I felt like he was radiating light. During evening self-study, I took out my notebook once more. September 7th, 2018. Friday. Sunny. Soliday, classmate. Flushed straight. After military training ended, we could go home on Saturday afternoon. The bell rang for dismissal. I grabbed my already packed bag from my desk and rushed hurriedly towards the school gate. The crowd surged out of the school gates like a tide. Every single free minute was precious. I made a quick getaway, becoming the first person to run out of school. The moment I stepped out of Watong City, No. 1 High, I felt like the air outside was sweet, and the wind carried the scent of chapai dao tea. I was the first one onto the number 217 bus, still a little out of breath. I swung my backpack from my back to my front. My home was 5 stops from school. My stop was called Moon Bay Residential. The terminal stop for the number 217 bus was Watong City No. 1 High. The 20-minute, bumpy bus ride was the distance between home and school. On the road home, you could see primary school kids just out of class walking together. Couples deeply in love cuddled up together. Mothers rushing their kids to tutoring classes, and old grandmas and grandpas leaning on canes, smiling and chatting about who knows what. Sitting on the bus heading home, it felt like the whole week's fatigue gradually melted away amidst this slice of everyday life. I'd been staring for a while. My eyes were getting tired. Leaning against the window, I turned my head slightly. Casually glancing towards the aisle, I unexpectedly saw shadow classmate just getting on the bus. He walked step by step from the front towards my direction, finally steadying himself not too far, not too close from me, holding onto the pole. His uniform jacket was slightly open, no particular style, no eye-catching attire, yet he was impossible to look away from. For that 20-minute ride, for the first time, I didn't stare at the scenery outside. I just kept gazing blankly at his profile. He seemed to possess a kind of magic, a magic that kept drawing my gaze towards him. That night, I sat at my desk in my bedroom. The desk lamp cast its yellowish, eye-protecting light onto my open workbook. I'd only written one multiple-choice answer. A solitary C sat on the page, pen in hand, but my thoughts had drifted out the window to the moon. I pushed the window open, and the cool evening breeze flowed in. That night when I got home, I had a very strange dream. I rarely dream, and when I do, they're usually simple things I forget entirely upon waking. This time I woke up, sitting in bed, but the dream was hauntingly clear. The dream was filled with books. Books stacked layer upon layer, seeming to reach as high as a building, towering and rising endlessly upwards. It was somewhat chaotic, hard to even find a foothold. Unfamiliar formulas and open books floated in the air. Scrolls of calligraphy hung within this sea of books. I looked down. A trail of ink stretched forward on the ground, its end obscured by piles of books. In the dream, I kept pushing aside things that felt like mist or clouds before my eyes, carefully moving backwards, until I saw a figure sitting in a chair, with a desk in front, and what looked like a book spread open on its surface. For some reason, it was a bit dazzling. I tried hard to look forward, shielding my eyes slightly with one hand. At the end of the light, someone was backlit. That figure lifted its head, and I raised my eyes to look as well. And at that look, I was stunned. That face I saw so often appeared, familiar yet strange, half hidden amidst the distant sea of books in my dream. I stopped walking, momentarily forgetting what I was supposed to be doing. I just kept staring at him. Think of someone by day, dream of them by night. Why would I dream of him? He seemed to frown slightly, a hint of confusion in his eyes. Our gazes met. Backlit, he walked gracefully towards me. And then, the world spun, and I woke up. Sitting on the bus back to school, I was drowsy. I couldn't stop thinking about that strange dream. As we neared the school, I opened my eyes, propping my head up with one hand. Still a bit groggy, I turned my head to stretch my neck. I was surprised to see shadow classmate standing right beside me. He was standing next to my seat, one hand holding the pole, the other resting casually on the back of my seat, his eyes closed in rest. Seeing it was him, I inexplicably stiffened. I sat there motionless, barely daring to breathe. Overcome by an unfounded fluster, I deliberately looked away. But I still couldn't resist sneaking glances. His eyelashes were so long. The young man stood in the aisle, the carriage crammed with people all wearing the same uniform. Yet it only made him stand out more. His uniform zipper was pulled up to his chest, his collar slightly low, collarbones faintly visible. On the right chest of his uniform, his school ID badge was neatly pinned. I squinted, trying hard to see, unconsciously craning my neck. Suddenly, the driver braked sharply. I was sitting down, but maybe because my body was already leaning forward slightly. I lost my balance, my head lurching straight towards the handrail. Unexpectedly, I didn't hit the hard metal pole. Instead, I seemed to bump into something relatively soft. A wave of warmth spread across my forehead. It was the heat radiating from someone's palm. A bit dazed, I looked up. Shadow classmate was looking down at me. He'd opened his eyes at some point, his hand still quietly spread out against the rail. Noticing that I had already raised my head, he slowly withdrew his hand and looked away from me. I touched my forehead. A trace of residual warmth remained. The bus is about to arrive at the terminal stop. Wutong City, No. 1 High. Please prepare to get off. I snapped back to reality like someone suddenly awakened from a daze. I had seen his badge. 2018 grade, Class 5, Ren Li. As soon as the announcement played, students started surging towards the back door, jostling to get off. Sensing the person beside me move towards the back, I quickly shouldered my bag, got off the bus, and headed towards the place where the crowd was flowing. Amidst the throng of people all wearing the same uniforms, I spotted his back instantly. I moved forward through the crowd, keeping a certain distance. Same direction. Even if our walking speeds differed, it didn't matter. The distance was fixed. Wherever the path led, we were bound to meet. That was the confidence of being 16 or 17. The confidence that we would never lose each other. When Meng Yang came to find me, I was still struggling with the newly learned physics concept of acceleration, frustrated because I couldn't solve the problem. She told me she was planning to participate in the welcome party. I lifted my head from the sea of problems and fell straight into her hopeful, starry eyes. Meng Yang was the girl who slept in the bunk above me. She had a great figure but a cute face, fair-skinned, and we got along really well. I immediately picked up on the key phrase in her words. Welcome party. I scratched my head. What welcome party? Our school is having one of those? Meng Yang nodded eagerly. Yes, I heard it from our homeroom teacher. Each class has to put forward one act. I asked her what she wanted to perform. She said she'd dance. I looked at her long, fair, slender legs and gave her an approving look. Shortly after dinner, there were still 40 minutes until the first evening self-study session. There weren't many people in the classroom yet. A few students were crowded around the electronic screen, sneakily watching a ball game. In summer, it gets dark slowly. Meng Yang and I on the balcony railing, chatting idly. Meng Yang was going on about this new senior she liked, a boy in grade 11. How handsome he was, how beautiful his eyes were, how energetic he looked in his uniform. But I couldn't concentrate. Looking down from the balcony, a familiar figure appeared right before my eyes. Shadow classmate was walking towards the teaching building, holding a basketball in one hand. Ren Li, his name was Ren Li. Unconsciously, I touched my forehead again. Lying on the balcony, the moon was already on duty, and my thoughts drifted with the wisps of wind towards the stars. Only the moon, I thought, could know what was in my heart. That day, in my small date grid, I wrote carefully, stroke by stroke. September 11th, 2018. Tuesday. Sunny shadow classmate, Ren Li. After returning to the dorm, I went to bed quickly. At Watong City, no. 1 high. We only had 20 minutes to wash up before lights out and a long night began. After falling asleep, it seemed I dreamt again. The moment I opened my eyes, I found I wasn't in the dorm. My mouth seemed to have dirt in it, making me cough violently. I looked around at my surroundings and was dumbfounded. Smoke filled the air, thick grey dust everywhere. It was noisy. The booming of cannons, the pop-pop of gunfire mixed with a jumble of other indistinguishable sounds. Underfoot were dirt trenches with bodies lying haphazardly around. This scene was completely beyond my comprehension. It was something I had never experienced. I looked around, bewildered, not understanding what was happening. Suppressing the shock inside, I pinched my palm. It didn't hurt. I breathed a sigh of relief. But how did I end up dreaming again? I frowned. Coming back to my senses, I realized I was holding a gun. Hesitantly, I gently tested the trigger. The bullet burst from the barrel, shooting diagonally forward. The recoil made me stumble back a few steps. Only then did I realize the gun in my hand was real. Cold sweat broke out on my back. Trembling, I put the gun down and leaned against the side of the dirt trench, trying to process everything. Sitting down, I looked around and noticed the bodies lying scattered in the trench. Their clothes looked very familiar. I moved closer to look, and saw they were wearing yellow uniforms. There were caps nearby too. But these caps ... Weren't these the clothes the little devils wore in movies about the war of resistance against Japan? So, I was having a dream about the anti-Japanese war. Bloody images flashed through my mind instantly. I shot up with a start, panicking, ready to flee. Before I could take more than a few steps, someone grabbed me from behind. It was a Japanese soldier, wearing a yellow turtle shell cap, with a small dark mustache above his lip. He held onto me tightly, preventing my escape. I pushed at him while screaming in terror. I frantically babbled, "Baka, Baka," trying to make him go away. Then the little devil suddenly opened his mouth. What he said, damn it, was in Chinese. "Taijin, we dash, big time charge." I rubbed my ears, utterly shocked, bewildered, and completely unable to comprehend what I was hearing. What kind of special breed was this? Why was a Japanese soldier speaking Chinese? I caught the word Tiju in what he said. Taijin? Me? Shouldn't I be a brave, heroic, enemy-slaying 8th Route Army soldier? I broke free from the soldier and looked down to check my own clothes. The bright, shit-yellow Taijin uniform was properly dressed on my body. Heavens above, earth below. I've done good deeds all my life, never committed any evil. Why make me a Japanese soldier? Why? Before I could even process the fact that I'd become a Taijin, the little Japanese beside me picked up the gun from the ground and shoved it into my hands. As I stood there dumbfounded, not knowing what this guy was trying to do, This brother suddenly raised his bayonet and shouted to those behind us. Shugoi, Taijum says everyone charge. Anyone who doesn't, die, die, die. I stared at him in horror, shaking my head frantically. I didn't say that. The restless soldiers couldn't contain their desire to rush to their deaths anymore. They howled, the crowd surging forward, pushing me along. Suddenly, the sound of hooves came from ahead. I strained to look forward. A group of cavalry in blue uniforms was thundering towards us, and inexplicably, I felt a surge of relief, as if I'd been liberated. Was this the Communist Party coming to save me? Look at that momentum, so much better than the Japanese. I hadn't run 2 steps before I felt like I couldn't move anymore. The next second, I was hoisted into the air. My Taijun cap fell off. I only saw that the clothes of the person holding me were blue. Before he could speak, I started first. Don't kill me. Don't kill me. Me. Big good person. I'm 8th root. I'm 8th root. The person holding me let go, and I landed flat on my bottom. Rubbing my sore rear, I looked up gloomily at the person sitting high on the horse. The moment I looked up, I was stunned. Wasn't this shadow classmate? I saw him wearing an 8th root army uniform, sitting on the horse. The clothes made him look very dignified. His face was darker than the skin tone I saw during the day, and his eyebrows were thicker. He frowned slightly, looking down at me. His large hand held the reins, and his legs, wrapped in white cloth, were pressed against the horse's flanks. He looked even more handsome than some male movie stars. He was about 2 or 3 steps away from me, but because he was on the horse and I was kneeling on the ground, he looked down at me, and I looked up at him. I suddenly felt a bit of distance and discomfort. We didn't speak, just looked at each other, a strange feeling rising in our hearts. Silence. It was as if the whole battlefield had suddenly emptied, leaving only the 2 of us. Except that this Taijin uniform I was wearing was rather inappropriate. Ren Li broke the silence. He dismounted and seemed to be walking towards me. And again, at this crucial moment, the world suddenly spun and I woke up. I sat up in my dorm bed, still a bit dazed. I looked down at the clothes I was wearing, saw it was still my pajamas, and breathed a sigh of relief. The wake-up bell had already rung. Everyone was folding their quilts. I buried my face in my blanket, still thinking about that absurd dream. So was I going crazy? After buying a meat bun at the cafeteria with Meng Yang, I ran straight to the classroom. Time was always tight, so we usually bought breakfast in advance and ate it during morning reading. So during that half-hour of morning reading, you could smell all sorts of different aromas wafting from behind everyone's books. The more reserved ones might eat a small, odorless cake, but most people opted for some kind of pancake. And the variety was astonishing. Crumbly pancakes, meat buns, stuffed pancakes, egg-filled pancakes. The bolder ones would even bring a bowl of instant noodles and share it with their deskmate. Hiding under the desk to avoid being caught on camera, or spotted by the homeroom teacher watching from the back door, I looked at my deskmate beside me, unsure whether to laugh or cry. She was dozing off but still clutching her corn cob. My deskmate was a round, chubby girl. Because she loved sleeping, eating, and was incredibly cute, and wore red-framed glasses, everyone called her Hongmai. Red. I was chuckling at her while trying to remember what the next class was. Suddenly my smile froze on my face. Oh crap, it's math class. I frantically shook the drowsy Hongmai awake. Wake up quick. It's math. Did you finish the homework? He's going to cover sequences and he'll be calling on people to answer questions. Hongmai, whose eyes had been closed, snapped awake instantly. The next second, she whipped out her thick workbook from under the desk and flipped to the page we needed to do. Quick, let me copy yours. Seeing that she hadn't done it either, I turned with lightning speed towards Fan Chang, the super brainiac sitting across the aisle. We both stared at Fan Ki anxiously. Fan Ke, used to this, adjusted his glasses and handed his workbook over to us. Clutching our lifeline, we immediately went into whirlwind emergency mode. The teacher didn't just check if you'd done the work. He also checked for markings and corrections, so we had to copy those too. Finally, just before the first class, we finished copying. After returning the workbook to Fan Ke, we calculated the time. 5 minutes left. I glanced at my watch. Still early, I decided to go out into the hallway for some air. I hadn't been standing there long when someone walked towards me from the end of the corridor, carrying a large stack of workbooks. I looked up and found myself locking eyes with Ren Li, who was holding the stack. He paused for a moment. When he saw it was me, his expression suddenly turned odd, a bit awkward, and he quickly averted his gaze. He hurried on. I was just wondering if I had something on my face when Ren Li had already walked into his classroom with the workbooks. I scratched my head, a little puzzled. The bell rang and I headed back into my own classroom. After a full day of classes, the teacher mentioned tomorrow's welcome party. Our class's act was Meng Yang's ethnic dance. I turned and secretly gave her a thumbs up. Meng Yang, catching my meaning, winked back at me. That evening during self-study, I wrote in my date grid. September 13th, 2018. Thursday. Sunny strange dream. Then I drew a little 8th Route Army soldier and a swaggering Taijun officer. I couldn't help but smile at the grid. Hong Mai, seeing my lovesick expression, rolled her eyes at me. The next day, Meng Yang got up early to go to rehearsals. I was still a little disappointed that I hadn't dreamed of Ren Li last night. When I got to the classroom in the morning, there weren't many people. I was just about to take out my popcorn and take a bite when the homeroom teacher rushed in hurriedly. I was so startled I nearly dropped my corn, quickly hiding it behind my back. She scanned the classroom, then spotted me. Her eyes lit up. Lin Jingjing? Come here quickly, I need your help with something. I discreetly hid the corn better and went over to the teacher. She looked at me approvingly first, then spoke. We're short a student to present awards at the welcome party. Time is tight, so quickly get yourself ready and go to the first floor of the art building to coordinate with Teacher Wang. The more I listened, the more confused I got, but the teacher didn't give me any time to react. She just pushed me to go quickly. As I ran, I thought, I've been entrusted with a last-minute important task. When I got there, I found Teacher Wang. She took one look at me and immediately pushed me to go change clothes. In the fitting room, I stared thoughtfully at the high-slit, bright red cheongsam and the high heels beside it on the floor. The size was right, but I'd never worn high heels before. I felt unsteady immediately, walking a bit shakily. When I came out, I practiced walking the stage with the 3 other students also presenting awards, and familiarized myself with the procedure. When we got to the stairs backstage, perhaps because the red carpet had been laid hastily, there were some wrinkles. Although I was watching my step, maybe due to poor lighting, I tripped on the carpet. A sudden feeling of weightlessness washed over me, and I was about to fall forward. Seeing myself about to pitch forward, I even forgot to scream. The next second, someone caught me by the waist. I looked up and met Ren Li's eyes as he looked down at me. This seemed to be the second time he'd caught me. His eyelashes drooped slightly. His hair looked a bit mussed from the sudden movement. The colorful stage lights made it hard to read his expression. All I could feel was my own deafening heartbeat. For a moment, I couldn't hear the gasps around me, couldn't see the people rushing towards us, forgot where and when I was. I could only feel the strong arm around my waist, and Ren Li slightly ragged breathing near my ear, and my face growing hotter and hotter. Flustered, I quickly stood up and thanked him, bowing once before rushing off backstage. Meng Yang, who was backstage preparing for her dance, saw my beet red face and was dumbfounded, probably thinking I'd been up to no good. The welcome party went off without a hitch. The first prize went to a very cute girl from class 22, who sang Destined. The second prize went to Meng Yang, who performed a stunning ethnic dance. The third prize was... Just as the third prize was announced, I was chatting backstage with another student. Suddenly, the etiquette teacher urgently told me to go up and present the award. Receiving the instruction, I immediately got into character, chest out, head high, smiling, teetering in my heels as I carried the trophy towards the center of the stage. I smiled, ready to hand the trophy to the winning student. I looked up and saw that the winner was Ren Li, representing the props team. Third prize, Best Logistics and Props Award. Thanks to all the students on the props team for their service tonight. Everyone, a round of applause. I stared blankly at Ren Li. He was very tall. Even in my heels, I only reached his shoulder. There, center stage, bathed in the spotlight, amidst the thunderous applause and the whispered "so handsome" I could hear from below. Wearing the most ordinary school uniform, yet still shining like a star. Holding the trophy, I looked up at him from the side. He turned slightly sideways, looking back at me. I didn't hesitate. I gave him a little smile and solemnly handed him the trophy. Back in the dorm that night, I tossed and turned, the day's scenes replaying wildly in my mind. After lights out, the dorm was very dark. Only moonlight streaming through the window onto the cabinets, casting a faint silver glow. Huddled under my covers, I couldn't hide my smile. Just thinking about shadow classmates seemed to make me inexplicably happy for no reason. I must be crazy. I'm definitely crazy. Thinking these thoughts, I eventually fell asleep. And then I had another strange dream. This dream seemed to be set in the Republican era. I rubbed my eyes and found myself wearing another bright red cheongsam, similar in style to the award ceremony dress, but with much finer fabric. I lightly pinched the corner of the fabric and looked up. Before me stood a tarnished bronze mirror, its reflection blurry, but I could vaguely make out the bold red lips and the waved hairstyle of the person in it. I looked around at my surroundings. It looked like the backstage of a dance hall, but it felt old, with very retro and modern decor. No surprise, another dream. So, where was I this time? Would I meet shadow classmate again? Puzzled, I held onto the dressing table and stood up. Suddenly, the door to the room burst open. I looked up. A gaudily dressed woman rushed towards me urgently, speaking as she came. "What are you still doing here? Master Ren from the south side of town is here and no one is attending to him yet." The next second, I was grabbed and dragged out unsteadily. We threaded through a haze of various perfumes, past willowy girls of different beauties, past gentlemen in suits, catching the occasional whiff of freshly baked soft pastries, plunging into the laughter and chatter of the crowd, until the opulent, modern-style central hall revealed itself before my eyes. A dazzling crystal chandelier hung in the center. The whole hall was decorated with lights, exuding a somewhat suffocating sense of luxury. Couples were dancing in the ballroom, the melody filling every corner. Everything before my eyes was dazzling. I felt like a tame sheep that had strayed into a forest. Before I could adjust, the woman gripping my wrist dragged me towards a man who had just entered the hall. It seemed to be snowing outside. A few snowflakes clung to the corner of the man's coat, but vanished in an instant. He brushed off the snow, waving his hand. The people surrounding him folded away the umbrellas. Another person respectfully slipped off his overcoat and stepped back. I looked up further. Just then, the dance hall's music came to an abrupt halt. Ren Li's face, illuminated by the lights, made everything around him pale in comparison. I forgot what I was supposed to do, only seeing Ren Li, who was also looking at me. The woman who had been dragging me pushed me towards Ren Li. I gasped softly, watching his face draw closer and closer, catching the clean, cool scent of him. Just like during the day, I thought. Ren Li said nothing. He wrapped his arm around my waist, pulling me slightly closer and steadying me. In the next instant, everyone who had been surrounding him vanished. The central crystal chandelier also stopped glowing. No one was left in the hall except Ren Li and me. Still a bit disoriented by all this, I could barely make out Ren Li, his hand on my waist in the dimness. Ren Li just kept leading me forward. When we reached roughly the center of the hall, the lights suddenly came back on, and the dance music started up again. Ren Li leaned in close to my ear and whispered, his breath warm on my neck, the air thick with an ambiguous fragrance. "Lin Jingjing, can you dance?" I looked at him in astonishment. As his words faded, space twisted and spun. I opened my eyes to the familiar ceiling. "Lin Jingjing, come and answer this question." The math teacher's familiar voice instantly snapped me back to the classroom. I gathered my thoughts and looked at the problem on the blackboard. Hong Mai beside me whispered, prompting me to choose B. Holding onto my desk, I looked at the teacher and said, "B." The teacher said nothing, just gestured for me to sit down. After that day, I didn't dream of shadow classmate again for a long time. Maybe that banquet dream had been too stunning, leaving me in a daze for days. It reminded me of reading Dream of the Red Chamber. I was like someone who had looked at the front of the precious mirror of romance. Except my mirror didn't show Wang Zifeng, but Ren Li. I felt a touch of that melancholy. My clothes grow slowly too large, yet I regret nothing. For her, I wither away, haggard and gaunt. Fortunately, after that, high school life steadily got on track. Everyone gradually became busier. Even though he was in the next class, by some twist of fate, I didn't see him again. But sometimes, when my mind wandered, I would still recall those handsome features from the dream. The final exams were approaching. Our school had weekly tests, mock exams, monthly exams, and midterms, but it placed special emphasis on the final exams. Not only would they print analysis reports for every subject with your grade ranking, but there would also be a parent-teacher meeting. Parents of students who didn't do well would have one-on-one sessions with the teachers to analyze their scores. It wasn't that I was afraid of doing poorly. I was terrified of this parent-teacher meeting. Usually my dad attended. Ever since I was little, for every parent-teacher meeting, my dad would take a half-day off specifically to come. He listened very attentively, even jotting down what the teacher said in a little notebook, then came home and exhorted me word for word. I waited anxiously, crouching by the classroom door. At Wutong City No. 1 High, students weren't allowed to sit in on parent-teacher meetings. A bunch of classmates secretly opened the back door a crack, and a crowd of ears pressed against it, trying to overhear and prepare countermeasures. I didn't feel like listening. I could guess with my toes what the homeroom teacher would say. Something along the lines of, certain students' grades dropped significantly this final exam. Lack of focus in class, daydreaming, eating breakfast during morning reading, not studying diligently, being restless, and so on. Any one of these charges could be elaborated on endlessly. And unfortunately, I happened to be one of those certain students. I went over to the corridor window to get some air. I didn't even notice someone standing nearby. After cooling down for a while, figuring the parent meeting was almost over, I closed the window and turned around. Only then did I realize a tall figure was beside me. I turned my head to look. Ren Li was wearing his summer short-sleeve uniform, the faint outline of muscles visible on his arms. His shoulder rested slightly against the wall, arms crossed. His hair seemed shorter than the last time I saw him. His eyes were closed, as if resting. From this angle, I could see his straight nose bridge and long eyelashes. People moved along the corridor. Some students were still pressing their ears to the door, trying to catch the teacher's words. Some had simply sat on the floor, reading cheap magazines like Age. Boys were reading Dao Luo Dalu. Others were hiding in less crowded spots playing Landlords, or the card game Senguosha. A few straighter students were doing homework in the hallway. Everyone was scattered along the corridor, doing their own thing. Only the two of us stood side by side, doing nothing at all. Just standing there together, not speaking. After the parent-teacher meeting, we could go home, and the winter break would begin. The winter break at Wutong City No. 1 High was very short. It was the high school with the fewest vacation days in the city. Back home that night, as expected, I dreamed again. Would I dream of Ren Li this time? I was still in a daze when I heard the door being violently pushed open. I instinctively turned my head and saw a fierce-looking face. The face was familiar, like I'd seen it not long ago. I thought for a moment. Wasn't this the dance hall owner woman who had dragged me to see Ren Li in the last dream? Why her again? I was puzzling over this when this time, the woman, dressed like an old nanny, grabbed my arm with one hand while planting the other on her hip. What are you standing around for? Hurry up and go attend to the young master. Why am I always attending on people in these dreams? I sighed helplessly. This young master was probably Ren Li again. How come he always gets such a good deal in these dreams? Could the tables turn just once? Maybe because I'd already had too many absurd dreams, I was numb to it. I perfunctorily acknowledged her, pretended to be timid, and followed behind the old woman. We passed through carved balustrades and pavilions amidst wooded terraces and waterside pavilions. Finally, I was roughly pushed into a room. As soon as I entered, sure enough, the young master sitting upright at the desk was Ren Li. Maybe seeing me again was becoming routine for him too. When he saw it was me, he put down his brush, stood up from the chair, and walked towards me. He was wearing a kind of long gown or mandarin jacket. Illuminated by the lit candles, he looked very plain and neat. He had a rather scholarly, refined air. I watched him get closer and closer, finally stopping about a step away from me. Although we never even greeted each other in daily life, being in the next class over meant we often crossed paths. In the dreams, we were much more familiar. Standing this close now made the atmosphere feel inexplicably awkward. Before I could take a step back to ease the discomfort, Ren Li spoke. His brows were furrowed, his expression serious as he looked at me, as if something important was happening. How come you only scored 56 on the math test? Hearing the words coming out of his mouth, I stared at him in disbelief. What was he talking about? How did he know I scored 56? Maybe my gaze was too intense. The dream Ren Li seemed to realize his words were out of place. His usually cold expression seemed to shift slightly, becoming a bit unnatural. He turned his head away and uttered a sentence. Your homeroom teacher named the students who failed during the parent-teacher meeting. I heard it. Finished speaking, without waiting for my reaction, he grabbed my arm and led me to the desk. The desk was covered with sheets of calligraphy paper filled with writing. The beautiful running script met my eyes, but the content didn't seem like poetry. Curious, I leaned in to look. Given the sequences, N, Bn, Cn, satisfying, Bn equals and dash 2 and plus 1 ... When I realized the paper was covered in sequence problems, I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. I just never imagined I'd become so studious that I dreamed of math problems. The Ren Li beside me didn't seem to notice my shock. He gently nudged me. For this problem, first you should ... then ... His low voice sounded in my ear, like a one-on-one tutoring session. And so, I was forcibly pushed into the chair and made to pick up the brush. Ren Li, pointing at the problems, began to explain them non-stop. The red candle burned until it was spent. The story of the dashing young master and the pretty maid seemed to have turned into a tale of the young master battling the dumb maid. Maybe it was because of this strenuous late-night struggle with sequences. I couldn't even remember how the dream ended. Even though it was a dream, it gave me the illusion that I'd actually stayed up all night studying. I lay paralyzed on my bed, devoid of all hope. I never wanted to dream again. But fate often doesn't comply. During the short 18-day winter break, I dreamed almost every single night. Every dream had Ren Li. Every dream had math. Chased by zombies, I, having turned into a zombie, was instead pursued by the human Ren Li, who yelled at me while running. Why couldn't that question be answered with C? In a thrilling ghost movie, I, playing a hanging ghost, was strung up on the beam, while Ren Li held up the final exam paper. In the last dream before school started, we were walking in the desert. I had a piece of white cloth on my head, dressed like an Arab. Slumped in the sand, I demanded to know why Ren Li interfered so much. He gazed calmly ahead, then turned to look at me with a slight smile. Have you forgotten? Tomorrow is the start of term exam, and the schools count towards class placement. Then I woke with a start, drenched in a cold sweat. I shook my head. From outside, my mom called me to come eat breakfast quickly, then head to school. Arriving at school, I was carrying a huge stack of books. Out of breath and exhausted, I leaned against the corridor wall to rest. Just as I was enjoying the breeze, Ren Li also arrived at school. Seeing it was him, I instantly remembered being forced by him in my dreams to study sequences. I felt a bit nauseous. That handsome face couldn't even arouse my desire to take a second look. As I was lost in thought, I heard someone call my name. The voice was incredibly familiar, just like in my dreams. The young man in his school uniform seemed to have gotten a haircut over the holiday, looking neat and crisp. The sunlight outside the corridor was perfect, enveloping him. He stopped, just a few steps away from me. He turned to look at me, a hint of a smile appearing between his brows and eyes. Lin Jingjing, happy new semester. I looked up in surprise. Ren Li in his school uniform calmly met my gaze. Lin Jingjing, what are you spacing out about? Hong Mai shook me, seeing me sitting at my desk in silence. I snapped back to reality, but Ren Li's happy new semester still lingered in my mind. Why would he greet me? In real life, we didn't know each other at all. I was baffled. Slowly, I pulled out my winter break homework and placed it in Hong Mai's hands. I shook my head, deciding not to think about it anymore. Soon enough, the homeroom teacher came bustling in. After collecting the homework, she handed out the exam papers. I frowned, staring at the paper. What Ren Li had scared me with in my dreams turned out to be true. Could my dreams predict the future? It just didn't add up. The familiar Ren Li, the abnormal start of term exam, and also ... I looked at the familiar problems on the math paper. The ones Ren Li had said were frequently tested. Everything was tinged with strangeness. Those dreams popped into my head one by one. Impossible to shake off. If the dreams were fake, then what did all this count as? Unless Ren Li was having the same dreams as me. Thinking of this, I was suddenly plunged into utter irritation. The dreams are interconnected? How could dreams be interconnected? Should I go and confront him now? He'd probably think I was crazy. No matter how I thought about it, I couldn't figure it out, so I just started writing the exam. Maybe the one-on-one tutoring in my dreams had actually worked. This math paper felt like I had divine help. I managed to answer most of it and felt pretty good about it. After school, I was late handing in my homework. By the time I got to the cafeteria, it was packed. Meng Yang and I, carrying our freshly bought meals, searched desperately for seats. Meng Yang spotted an empty table and excitedly called me over. I was also thrilled to finally sit down. I just put down my tray. Before I could even sit, I suddenly smelled a very familiar scent. Lin Jingjing, can you dance? For this question, choose C, look at A. Lin Jingjing, happy new semester. Memories instantly flooded my mind. This scent. It was the scent from my dreams. It was Ren Li's scent. I instinctively turned my head to look. Ren Li paused his chopsticks, unhurried. He looked at me once more. There was a seriousness in his eyes. I taught you those few problems from today's exam. How did you do? Did you get them? As soon as the words left his mouth, I turned to him in disbelief. Meng Yang, who had just sat down across from me, immediately looked up at me upon hearing this. The people sitting around Ren Li also stopped talking, pausing mid-meal. The midday news was still playing in the center of the cafeteria. The anchorman's voice was drowned out by the noisy chatter of students. The clatter of trays, chopsticks, and bowls was crisp and conspicuous. Ren Li and I locked eyes. I looked at him as if I were looking at a ghost. That night, at 11 p.m., the lights in the dormitory went out right on time. Meng Yang in the bunk above turned over, muttering something unintelligible in her sleep. The other girls in the dorm were breathing rhythmically, softly, obviously fast asleep. It was already late at night, but I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. My mind felt like a complete mess. Ever since I found out that the dreams might be shared, I'd felt uncomfortable. I had this persistent feeling that all my thoughts were being watched. Come to think of it, how did he know that I was having the same dreams as him? For the next few days, maybe because of the heavy workload, I didn't dream at all. The sports day was approaching. The PE teacher handed me a large stack of numbered bibs. He asked me to deliver some to Class 5 as well. I knocked on Class 5's door. Ren Li answered. Seeing it was me, he paused slightly. What is it? Holding the bibs, I didn't rush to explain. I looked up at him, suddenly gazing into his eyes. Evening self-study hadn't started yet. The sky was already dark ink, and the corridor lights were dim. The windows were still open. The northern evening breeze merrily slipped into the hallway. A few students were passing by in the corridor. We stood between the two classrooms. I spoke softly. How did you know I could dream of you? Back in the classroom, my face red, I walked straight to my seat. As soon as I sat down, I started rummaging frantically through my desk drawer. Hong Mai, seeing my flushed face and somewhat exasperated expression, couldn't help but be curious. What's wrong? Did you get caught sneaking around? As if my secret had been exposed. I paused for a moment, then rummaged even more urgently. Finally, I found my notebook. I hurriedly flipped it open. September 13th, 2018. Thursday. Sunny strange dream. The little 8th Route Army soldier and the swaggering Taijin officer were still clearly drawn on the page. Ren Li's words from just now echoed in my mind. That day in the corridor, your things scattered. The notebook happened to be open to that page. He didn't need to say more. I immediately remembered what happened that day. The day after I had that little Japanese soldier dream, I was distracted all day. It was almost time for the weekly test. I was carrying a stack of my books to store in the resource room. On the way, I accidentally bumped into Ren Li. My things scattered everywhere, including my notebook. At the time, I was too busy gathering my things and apologizing to notice that the person I'd bumped into was Ren Li. And that page just happened to be seen by Ren Li. Frustrated, I hugged the notebook and lay my head on the desk. But I was also relieved. At least I hadn't written anything too cringy. Covering my face, I was still thinking about the last thing Ren Li said to me. Lin Jingjing, you look very beautiful in a cheongsam. My hands covered my face. No one saw the slight curve of my lips or my reddening earlobes. The sports day kicked off with great fanfare. Our class was full of talented people, so they didn't need a weakling like me to compete. I thought I was in the clear and could happily slack off. But maybe because of my decent performance at last year's welcome party, Teacher Wang, the same one from before, found me again. She asked me to present awards again. This time, the award ceremony skirt was a short skirt. The wind in May was still quite strong. Although I was wearing safety shorts, I still felt a bit self-conscious. Holding the trophy in one hand, I used the other to desperately tug my skirt down, afraid the wind would blow it up. On the stage stood the champions, runners-up, and third-place finishers of the men's 1500-meter final. The person standing on the highest platform in the center, I knew him. Ren Li was in his school uniform. He'd probably come straight from running to receive the award, as his uniform jacket was unzipped. Standing there with that handsome face, he was a natural work of art. I could hear female seniors on the bleachers behind me saying how handsome Miss Junior was. I couldn't agree more. The school officials arrived fashionably late. I followed closely behind them, handing them the trophy I was holding. The official, smiling, handed it to Ren Li. Looking up at him, he must have been very tired just now. There were beads of sweat on his neck. I thought to myself, after the awards, today's sports day was basically over. I wasn't presenting at tomorrow's closing ceremony or the morning events, so I prepared to head back to the dorm to change back into my uniform. I was still carrying some things for our class in both hands. No free hand to hold down my skirt hem. I sighed. I could only pray there wouldn't be any wind. I hadn't taken many steps when I heard someone call me. Lin Jingjing. Ren Li stopped running, slightly out of breath. He didn't say much, just quickly took off his uniform jacket. Seeing my hands were full, he paused for a moment. Holding his jacket in one hand, he took the things I was carrying with the other. Under his uniform jacket, he was wearing a vest. I didn't know if it was because he had a habit of working out, or because he'd just been sweating, but around his abdomen I could vaguely see the outline of muscles. Before I could look any longer, he handed me his uniform jacket. Tie it around yourself. It's not convenient for me. His gaze was a bit uncomfortable. He looked away. I looked down at my short skirt, then back at him. Understanding dawned. I tied Ren Li's jacket around my waist. With Ren Li's jacket on, the skirt obediently stayed against my legs. Ren Li and I, one tall, one short. I was in my award ceremony outfit, Ren Li in his grey vest. We wove through the crowd of classmates, all wearing the same uniform. We didn't speak, only walked in step, unconsciously in sync. It had been a long time since I'd last dreamed. Maybe because the daytime heartbeat had been so deafening, that night, I dreamed of Ren Li again. Misty, steamy, warm yellow lights, water droplets on the walls. Where was this? A bathroom? I gently touched the wall, only then realizing I was wearing a short skirt. Probably the same one from the day. Just as I was wondering, through the thick mist, I could vaguely make out a figure. Lin Jingjing? Ren Li's voice came from over there. The figure got closer and closer until it was clear. The Ren Li in the dream wasn't wearing a shirt. Only a towel wrapped around his waist. Without the fabric of the vest from the day, his abs were right there, thrusting into my field of vision. I tried hard to look away, but I just couldn't. Even when I turned my head, they were still there in my peripheral vision. Ren Li also seemed to realize he wasn't wearing clothes. He looked a bit embarrassed and at a loss. In the midst of this standoff, I remembered the incident with his uniform jacket from the day. I opened my mouth awkwardly. From earlier ... thank you. I waited for a response that never came. I turned my head to look. Ren Li was looking at me with a hint of a smile. Lin Jingjing. Could your thank you gift be your contact information? Just before the weekend break, the homeroom teacher handed out the Arts and Sciences stream selection forms. Lying on my bed in my room, I picked up the form and fell into deep thought. If I chose science, my physics and chemistry grades were just average. If I chose arts, then I'd probably have to go to the 4th floor. That's where all the arts classes were. The 4th floor? It would be hard to see him every day, wouldn't it? I sighed and picked up my phone from beside my pillow. Ren Li was at the top of my WeChat contacts. I had him saved as shadow classmate. Ren Li never posted on Moments. His only post was from years ago, a promotional piece about aircraft carriers. His profile picture was also a little soldier. His nickname was Strong Nation Have Me. I remembered when he first added me, I almost thought it was one of my uncles. I kept tapping on his profile picture and backing out, over and over. Maybe Ren Li could sense my remote harassment. He sent a message. I went to look, it was a picture. There was a delay. I opened the image. A photo of the moon at night. My heart skipped a beat. For no other reason than my WeChat bio read. If you miss me, send me a picture of the moon. I panicked a little, like the moon had overheard my thoughts. Eager to escape something, I replied. Arts and sciences selection. I don't know what to choose. He didn't reply immediately, as if my sudden question had stumped him too. Ding dash dong dot dot. Your physics and chemistry scores are middling. You might find them tougher later on. Objectively speaking, I'd suggest you choose arts. Ren Li was exceptionally good at science. Our two classes shared the same physics teacher. That teacher often praised Ren Li in our class, using his test papers to explain problems. I didn't need to think twice. He'd definitely choose science. Him rushing me towards arts. An inexplicable irritation flared up. I questioned him, as if deliberately trying to stump him. And subjectively. Do you want me to choose arts? After sending it, I slammed my phone face down on the bed, afraid to look at his reply. My phone rang. Slowly I picked it up, unable to resist looking. The window wasn't properly closed. The spring night air carried a fresh scent. Slight wisps of wind drifted through the room. Subjectively, I only want what's best for you. Looking at this message, I suddenly smiled, the corners of my mouth curving up uncontrollably. Many years later, I asked Ren Li. I said, why didn't we do like in romance novels? One following the other into arts or science. Wouldn't it have been good for me to choose science? Then you could have seen me every day. Ren Li put down what he was doing and looked at me very seriously. Life isn't a novel, and choosing arts or science isn't a farewell forever. If I want to see you, I'll cross 3 floors to go to the 4th and find you. Every second, every minute I want to see you is my opportunity. I can't limit you for the sake of momentary pleasure. The best love is to help you become better and better. After the arts and sciences separation that time, I chose arts and successfully moved to the 4th floor. I'd lie on the railing on the 4th floor balcony, just sighing. Ren Li was on the 1st floor. I could hardly see him even if I wanted to. And I couldn't dream of him either. After evening self-study one night, dejected, I was slouching as I walked out of the teaching building along the corridor. The path out of the teaching building passed by Ren Li's classroom. I hadn't gone far past their classroom window when I suddenly felt someone grab my arm from behind. Class had just ended not long ago. Everyone was rushing back to the dorms to wash up and sleep. The corridor was packed with jostling people, all in the same uniform, all surging forward. Ahead of me, the dean of students and Ren Li's homeroom teacher were walking. Watong City No. 1 High strictly forbade early relationships. Even boys and girls eating together in the cafeteria would get a talking to from the patrolling teachers. After evening self-study, boys and girls walking together had to sneak along the small paths. Surprised, I followed the hand gripping my arm and looked back. Amidst the chaotic noise of laughter, chatter and horseplay, the corridor lights flickered dimly. Crowds of people, tall and short, a group of brilliant teenagers in the prime of their youth, all wearing the same uniforms, the summer heat masking their restless hearts. Ren Li seemed to have just pushed through the crowded throng. One hand held my arm tightly, the ends of his hair slightly tousled. His gaze was intense as he looked down at me. Classmates pushed past him on either side, turning their heads in surprise as they passed. All sounds vanished. All people disappeared. Every scene spoke of emotion. I stared at him, dumbfounded. I saw his lips move, as if he was saying something. I strained to make it out. Walk together. I admitted at that moment. I really did hear the sound of my heart pounding wildly. It seemed like it started from that day. Every day after evening classes ended, Ren Li would wait at the door of his classroom for me to come down from the 4th floor. Then we'd walk, one after the other. Rules prevented us from walking side by side, but it felt like our hearts were already walking shoulder to shoulder. Neither of us ever pointed out how beautiful the moonlight was that night. Being in the midst of spring, we didn't rush to bloom summer's flowers. The destination was the same. How we got there didn't matter so much. The words left unspoken didn't need to become our shackles. If your heart has someone to love, just keep striving upwards. because you'll meet eventually, sooner or later. I don't remember when it started, but the LED screen on the teaching building began displaying the countdown to the college entrance exam. I don't remember when it started, but suddenly a countdown board appeared in our classroom. I don't remember when it started, but after class, you rarely heard laughter anymore. Senior year was like a forceful, invading rain, bringing overwhelming pressure at the slightest provocation. Endless test papers and endless problems, like raindrops pressing down on everyone's backs. The weight of a single sheet of paper couldn't crush your shoulders, but it gradually wore the heart down. As deep winter approached, the accumulated snow was swept into piles at the base of the trees, forming small hills. The jade-like snow hadn't melted on the rooftops of the teaching buildings. On the desks, stacks of textbooks and practice papers rose like small mountains. Dusk was approaching. Perhaps because it was about to snow, the sky was yellow, as if the setting sun had been smeared across it. Evening self-study as usual meant writing test papers. The math teacher stood beside me, watching me hurriedly scribble down nonsensical answers. His brow gradually furrowed. His stern voice sounded above my head. 100 days until the college entrance exam, and you still can't solve trigonometric functions. The other students in the classroom had been writing their papers. The teacher's voice shattered the silence. The glances thrown my way pricked at me like needles. I've always been someone who cares most about face, who is most competitive. I lowered my head, my mind a tangled mess. All I could vaguely hear was a deafening chorus of "I'm doomed. I'm an idiot. Why can't I get something so simple right? I'm going to fail the exam." My nose stung, but I held back the tears, refusing to cry. After evening classes ended, my classmates all rushed downstairs towards the dorms. I crouched in the corridor outside our classroom door, watching the stream of students disappear down the hall, until the classroom lights went out, and the motion sensor lights in the corridor also fell dark and silent from the stillness. I huddled by the door, hugging my backpack, head down. I didn't want to move. Only boundless, all-encompassing despair remained. Suddenly, the corridor light came on. Someone had run up the stairs. Ren Li appeared at the end of the corridor, out of breath. His eyes immediately found me, curled up at the far end. Snow began to fall in earnest, swirling flakes drifting in through the gaps in the poorly sealed corridor windows. Step by step, the light traveled from that end all the way to my corner, illuminating the winter night. That warmth crouched down in front of me. Softly he spoke. "Lin Jingjing, don't cry." The last motion sensor light clicked off. Over a dozen surveillance cameras lined the corridor. I rested my forehead against Ren Li's chest. The darkness shielded our surging affection. At that moment, nothing else seemed to matter. From that day on, whenever Ren Li had a spare moment, he'd come up to the 4th floor to explain problems to me. Couldn't do trigonometry. He taught me until I could. Starting from the very basics, he thought of ways every day to find me different types of problems to practice. Finally, I never lost points on those trig problems again. Every night after self-study, we'd walk, one behind the other. Winter passed, spring arrived. From withered branches to the fresh green of early summer. From walking through heavy snow to walking through the world's revival. From the blooming of winter jasmine to the first sight of lotus buds. He was like my shadow, always behind me. He watched me change from the red winter uniform to the blue summer one. He watched my math score go from 80 to 120. He watched me go from being perpetually gloomy to laughing out loud. He witnessed my entire youth. On graduation photo day, right after my class photo was taken, I saw Ren Li waiting for me nearby. Maybe because the holiday was approaching. Maybe because we were graduating. Maybe because parting was imminent. Everyone was taking photos together on the school square. The love that had been suppressed in their hearts was revealed under the scorching sun that day. Even the school officials turned a blind eye, indulging this restless youth. Smiling, I walked towards Ren Li. For the first time, I took his hand. In response, his larger hand held mine even tighter. Hand in hand, I looked up at him. Sensing my gaze, he turned his head to look back at me. Just like, at the very beginning, he stood in front of me, his shadow shielding me from the sweltering sun. Shadow classmate. I'm here. The end. Bonus short scene 1. Before the college entrance exam, my dad and I went to a Taoist temple in the city to pray for success in the exams. In the Wencheng Pavilion, god of literature. I devoutly placed a lit lotus lantern before the deity. The air was thick with the scent of incense. Kneeling there, I silently made my wish. The modest hall was crowded with boys and girls around my age, along with their parents. Their faces were serious, their eyes filled with hope and expectation. Leaving the temple and heading towards the exit, there was a long mountain path. Halfway down the mountain, there were some makeshift stalls. Some sold incense, others sold ornaments and beads. A miscellaneous assortment scattered along both sides of the path. My dad wandered over to a stall selling beads, browsing. I, however, looked around. Since starting senior year, I'd rarely had a chance like this to be out and about. Suddenly, I noticed a small stall tucked away in a corner. It was inconspicuous. I couldn't tell what it sold. No one was paying it any attention. For some reason, that stall seemed to draw me in. I inexplicably walked towards it. Getting closer, I realized it was a fortune-telling stall. The fortune teller wasn't wearing sunglasses like in TV shows. He looked to be around 50 or 60, smiling serenely, sitting there calmly. Seeing me approach, he looked up and asked kindly, "Little girl, do you want your fortune told, or are you seeking your fate in love?" Hearing this, I immediately waved my hands. Getting a fortune told right before the college exam. What if it predicted something bad? It would definitely shake my confidence. I smiled awkwardly, ready to slip away. Before I could turn around, I heard the fortune teller slowly speak again. A fish playing in water emerges from the waves asking, leaping and roaming, how could it be content with the ordinary? Joyfully meeting prosperity, all things go smoothly. No more dangers or difficulties lie ahead. Little girl, dreams are the continuation of past life fate in this life. A perfect match like gold and jade, praised for 100 generations. I looked up at him in disbelief. The fortune teller fanned himself with his palm leaf fan, his eyes already closed in rest. Walking down the mountain, I kept thinking about the last thing the fortune teller said to me as I left. Little girl, you have deep blessings. You will obtain all that you wish for. If not for the dreams, maybe Ren Li and I wouldn't know each other now. Ren Li doesn't talk much. Usually he has this aloof, distant air. And me, I'm introverted and competitive. I wouldn't actively reveal my feelings. Even if I liked someone a lot, I wouldn't admit it or show it. So if the dreams hadn't been shared, the two of us would have been like two parallel lines, never intersecting, forever. The scenery flashed past the car window. I leaned gently against the seat, thinking silently to myself. So, this is our past life fate, continuing in this life? The corners of my mouth curved up slightly. Maybe. Love is persistent entanglement. Endless entanglement. Only wanting to grow old together. Life after life. On the day the college entrance exam results came out, Ren Li and I were eating at a restaurant outside. Seeing it was almost noon, I took out my phone to check, but I was too scared, hesitating. After thinking it over, I shoved my phone into Ren Li's hands and made him look for me. Ren Li calmly entered his own password, leaving the final step for me. We held each other's phones. The page refreshed. I looked happily at the score displayed on Ren Li's phone. He'd done really well. With that score, the National Defense University he'd always wanted to go to should be secure. Beaming, I looked up to show him his phone. As I looked up, Ren Li was also smiling at me. Ren Li is a man of few smiles. He only smiles when he's truly happy. He smiles beautifully, like a young nobleman from a drama. Lin Jingjing, you were amazing. His phone screen was already facing me. I saw my score. I'd done really well. Even a bit higher than my best mock exam score. I cheered, jumped up, and rushed into Ren Li's arms. I hugged him tightly, my face buried in his clothes. My voice was a little choked. Ren Li, I did it. I did super well on the math exam. His response was his arms, carefully wrapping around me. It seemed only natural that we got together. No ceremony, no big confession. Just a naturally held hand, a meeting of eyes and hearts. On the night of Kixi Festival, after a day of wandering around, Ren Li walked me to the bottom of my apartment building. I was about to turn and go up. Ren Li called out to me. He was dressed very handsomely today. When I first saw him, I teased him about being so formally dressed. Darkness filled the sky. The day was fading. Midsummer, The moon had climbed above the branches. The roadside lights were growing sparse, and the distant sounds of children playing could be heard. Ren Li stood before the light, just looking at me with that smile. The flutter of young hearts never stops at midsummer. It rides the wind towards the rising sun of tomorrow. Bonus short scene 2. Lin Jingjing, I like you. My name is Ren Li. My mom always says I walk around with a stern face all day, way too serious. She rarely sees me smile. She complains that she gave birth to a Yan Wang, king of hell. I don't see it that way. Nothing's funny. Why should I smile? Better to spend the time reading about aircraft carrier construction. My aunt once thought I might like boys. My mom scoffed at that. She told my aunt, boys wouldn't want this cold block of ice either. I thought about it silently. In my 15 or 16 years, I did only have male friends. I could count on one hand the times I'd spoken to girls, and those were under unavoidable circumstances. Starting high school, I decided to break this pattern. In this high school, I'd try my best not to speak. Registration day, it was scorching hot. The blazing sun was right overhead. Suddenly, someone in the queue called my name. The voice was unfamiliar. I frowned and looked back, my peripheral vision catching something in the patch of shade cast by my shadow. Someone was crouching there, a tiny ball, curled up in my sliver of shade, like an orange cat oozing laziness that had suddenly wandered into my world. I was inexplicably amused. A weird sense of humor. I was dying from the heat, and this person was taking full advantage. Later, I couldn't help but sneak more glances at her. She was from the next class. We saw each other often. I often studied secretly in my dreams. I never thought this was shameless, because I studied when I wasn't sleeping too. I was studying openly and honestly. I loved studying. So my dreams were always filled with math problems. Until she appeared one day. My dreams installed a new program. No more boring math formulas and physics problems. She just barged into my stagnant world like this, stirring up towering waves. I couldn't help but want to get closer to her. When she was zoning out alone in the corridor, I'd quietly move next to her shadow, pretending to read a book. Seeing her struggle with those damn math problems, I couldn't help but want to teach her. Seeing she was on the award ceremony team, I volunteered to be the props team leader. I was never one to seek the limelight, but her appearance made me unconsciously break my own rules. During military training, seeing her in the crowd watching, I went and sang. At the sports day, when she went to present awards, I quietly signed up for an event I was good at. I often joked to myself that I was like a male peacock displaying its feathers, unable to stop myself from showing her my best side. Some people just have a fatal attraction. It's like fate from a past life. A good match continued in this one. I always thought that terrifying idea of liking someone would never happen to me. After all, like my mum said, I had a phobia of people. Let's assume my mom is right for now. But I fell hopelessly in love with Lin Jingjing anyway. It took me many years to figure out what liking someone really means. Liking someone is like falling into a swamp. Body and mind slowly sink into it. That fatal attraction pulls you down together. You abandon the devil of the underworld, and before you know it, it's already seeped into your skin, your organs. From then on, every emotion, every desire, everything concerns you. Let me reiterate, I don't laugh much, but faced with Lin Jingjing's face, I can't bear to be cold and icy. Well, Lin Jingjing, that's my proposal speech. I stayed up all last night thinking about how to write it. Now you've heard it. Have you decided? Will you marry me?